What's up, everyone? Welcome to another World Football stream. Not on a Thursday, doing it on a Wednesday today because we have these Champions League matches to go over. Reason being, these are the last Champions League matches we will get to watch until January 20th, I believe it is. Regardless, in about a month. So that's going to be a long time without Champions League. Get a little break from it. Teams have time to sort of go on holiday if you're not in England, because we know in England they start packing the schedule. But now that we've seen six matches, I believe it is, how are you feeling? How is your team doing? Anyway, we'll get into all of that. My name is Adrian. I thank you for joining me, whether you're in the Bleacher Report app or you're in the BR Football YouTube chat. Thank you for joining me. Do make sure you leave your comments below so that you can get all of your thoughts out there. You can ask questions, whatever you want, and I will be sure to look those over as we go. But the theme of this episode is teams needing a positive result. I could have worded that better, but it's teams needing a positive result. There's a lot of teams out here that could have used one. And we're going to start with Man City versus Real Madrid, a match that just finished moments ago at the Santiago Bernabeu. Just finished. It was the match that everyone was sort of saying was the decider for Xabi Alonso as to whether he will end up keeping his job or will he be sacked following this if they were to lose to Manchester City, which of course they did. Obviously, you know the score already, I'm sure. 2-1 Manchester City from the Santiago Bernabeu against Real Madrid. And even you could say both of these teams needed wins. Of course, Real beat Olympiacos in the past match. Wasn't overly convincing. 4-3, a close one. City lost to Leverkusen in the past match. There was lots of storylines going into this one. Pep Guardiola, I think, playing against Real Madrid for the 28th time in his career. Man City and Real Madrid have faced each other every single season for the past 5 seasons, so they are very, very familiar with each other. This is a UCL Clasico. And speaking of which, this guy right here, Rodrigo, not only did he end his goal drought at 31 games after scoring against Manchester City, but he's scored now in 5 or 6 times against Manchester City. Like, he is a guy that does not stop scoring, no matter who he's playing or which version of Manchester City he's playing against, no matter what kind of form he's in. As you can see here, going on that long 30-plus game goalless drought, he will find a way. And he did so in this one to open things up. And that made you think, look, maybe even without Kylian Mbappe in this game, maybe this is where Real Madrid start to bounce back, getting a result against Manchester City. Could this be the beginning or that first domino falling for them to get their form back? Because they've been struggling domestically. In the Champions League, they haven't been overly convincing. But then City pull themselves level from I believe it was a corner kick or a free kick deep in the corner. I think it was a corner kick. Young man Nico O'Reilly hopping on that loose ball in there. Then you had Haaland equalizing from the spot, just going through the major events that happened in this game. Haaland equalizing from the spot after he was hauled down by Antonio Rudiger. Rudiger and Haaland, that's another storyline that you guys will remember as a classic. Those two absolutely wrestling each other to the ground in plenty of matches. We saw a lot of cutaways, a lot of shots of the abuse that Haaland was getting, the constant annoyances that he was getting from Raul Asensio and Antonio Rudiger, stepping on the feet, grabbing his arms constantly, pushing him in the chest constantly, giving him little slaps, things like that. But if there's anyone who can put up with it, it's Erling Haaland, a guy who was playing in his 50th start or not just for Manchester City, obviously, but his 50th start in the Champions League. And he now has 51 goals in 50 starts in the Champions League. Of course, overall, he has 55 goals in 54 matches overall. So he still has that record of having more goals than he does appearances in this competition, which is just unbelievable. And that second half of this one started to kind of resemble a basketball game, which for neutrals like myself, you love to see it. You love to see that end-to-end stuff. But in the end, Manchester City do hang on. Real Madrid coming close on a few occasions. You had Endrick getting out there, finally getting some opportunities. You had Real Madrid coming close through Vinny, through Rodrigo, through whomever. But they just could not get that equalizer in the end. So they do end up losing 2-1 at home. And I do feel bad for Xabi Alonso because, as we were speaking about earlier, Could this spell the end for him now that he's lost? There are a lot of reports that he's lost the dressing room, that there's a complete disconnect. And the players who are allegedly unhappy are ones that were playing, like Vinny and Rodrigo and Garcia, Raul Asensio, etc. Some of them out of necessity, of course. Some of them had to be out there due to injuries. But it kind of just gives this overall feeling when you couple that with the result, with the sort of demeanor of some of the players on the pitch. Not so much in this game. I thought that they showed more energy and more desire out there than previous matches. But you couple it with that, and it just gives the feeling that he's kind of getting bullied out of this club, which of course, I mean, it falls on him to not allow that to happen, right? Having to give in to their demands is not something that you want to see a coach doing. You don't want the inmates running the prison, so to speak, right? But it's a funny coincidence, an interesting thing that I was thinking about earlier, how the coaches who follow up Carlo Ancelotti kind of face player revolts in a sense. Different situations, completely different situations, of course, but that's why I say it's a funny coincidence. But you see managers like Ancelotti and Zidane doing so well at Real Madrid because they understand players, they understand how to manage egos, they manage the talent brilliantly. Everyone stays relatively happy. There are exceptions, of course, but there are few exceptions. My God. Um, you saw it happen with Rafa Benitez, of course. Very different situation, very different manager, very different scenario. Rafa Benitez sort of taking that revolt. He ends up leaving, and then a Zidane comes in. The other guy who follows up Carlo Ancelotti, Xabi Alonso, he's having a very difficult time sort of keeping everyone happy. So it unfortunately may spell the end for Xabi Alonso. And unfortunately, again, it may have a lot of people sort of questioning, was that first season under Leverkusen, that undefeated season, not his first, I guess, his first full season at Leverkusen, a fluke? Was it a fluke? I just I don't know. I hope not. I hope that he does get more opportunities if this is the end for him at Real Madrid, but we're going to have to wait and see what happens in the news over the next little bit. Gigi says, please tell us why there's no season 8. Y'all didn't tell us if the champions ended. So I'm looking forward to the season 8, 9, and 10. That I cannot answer. That you'll have to sit in suspense. But look, I know that the champions is very popular. I love it myself. It would be great to see another season. But look, there's a lot of moving parts in an organization, right? There's a lot of things that hold things back. Maybe there's something else. I don't know. I have no idea. I just work here. I just work on these streams, But Rod says Xabi needs to stay. I would like to see that happen. I would like to see that happen as well because, again, I don't want to see that unbelievable season that he had with Leverkusen to be questioned. That's something that would be unfortunate, and inevitably people are going to say that, oh, he's just, he can't do it outside of Germany. I think that he can. This is just a whole nother animal. Maybe he is showing a little bit of his inexperience as a manager. That could be it. But enough about him, enough about Real Madrid and Manchester City, even though we could talk about that for a very long time. Let's get into Inter versus Liverpool. Again, like I said, two sides who needed a win here. You have Inter, who lost to Atleti in the last round. You have Liverpool, who got absolutely smoked 4-1 by PSV at Anfield. So this match, was kind of marked by two frustrating decisions, one for Liverpool, one against. So perfectly balanced, I guess, as you can see. Just as, look, possession and shots were pretty much perfectly balanced. I do know that the expected goals was much higher for Liverpool. A lot of Inter's opportunities were from distance, not very good ones. But, of course, there's the handball call where Liverpool score in the first half via a header coming off of Van Dijk onto Ekitike's arm, and then straight to Konate to head in for 1-0. But taken back due to the handball, I don't feel great about that one. You don't want to see goals taken back for that kind of thing when someone is heading onto their teammate's hand from inches away. It just feels unfair, but I guess it is one of those sort of by-the-book handball calls, which, by the way, the handball rule right now is a mess. It's an absolute mess. It seems like referees themselves, the guys who are officiating matches, are inconsistent with it from game to game. It seems like the ex-referees and pundits who are trying to explain away these calls that the referees are making are inconsistent with it, and they're kind of making it up as they go to try and explain the handball rule. Well, it's in an unnatural position, yes, but it was headed off of his teammate from inches away. Is it his fault? No. They just go back and forth. No one really has any clarity. The state of the handball rule is just a mess. It needs to be cleaned up. Then, of course, you have the penalty, which Liverpool supporters will say, well, look, we got screwed by the handball, so we sort of deserve this. But this was a pretty soft penalty. Bastoni grabbing onto Florian Wirtz's shirt, Wirtz making an absolute meal out of that small tug. It was definitely not enough to take a man down. If that's enough to take a man down, then that boy needs to get his balance checked. He might have vertigo or something like that. If we're looking at Chiellini tugging Saka back in Euro 2020. That is a huge, huge foul. But this, about as soft as you can get. Look, I think ultimately over the run of play, Liverpool will be happy. And I think that this could be huge for them to sort of turn their season around a little bit. Inter Milan's unbeaten streak at home in the Champions League ended at 18 games after Liverpool's late penalty. That is a great record, and I'm sure they'll say a robbery due to the penalty call of their record. But Inter themselves, I'll go back to Liverpool in a second, but Inter themselves are struggling when they come up against their peers, if you will, this season. Losing to Atleti, losing to Liverpool now, and then domestically losing to Juventus, losing to all the good teams in Serie A as well. So Inter struggling when they play against the big teams, but Liverpool, with all the drama going on with Salah in the background, it will be interesting to see if this is a turning point for them to get this kind of win away to Inter. Was it pretty? No, but you're ultimately going away to San Siro and getting 3 points at a time when, look, you got smoked 4-1 at home in the last game. So this could be huge for Liverpool and their form going forward. So that's that match. Now, Thriller08 says, Vinny, 15 games without a goal. Is it time for Madrid to let him go? That is a tough one, obviously, because Vinicius Jr. is a massive talent. And if you are a coach, I think that it is in your interests to make it work with someone like Vinicius Jr. But the other side of the coin there is that Vinicius Jr. hasn't really been able to find that kind of form, that Ballon d'Or winning form. He didn't end up winning it, of course, but close to winning it, that kind of form for a long, long time. For a long time. It seems like the not winning the Ballon d'Or kind of broke him a little bit, as well as like sort of a accumulation of things. You know, you have so long where Vinicius Jr. is in the shadow of Benzema or whomever it may be at Real Madrid. Benzema leaves, Vinny Jr. leads them to a Champions League. Then who comes along? Kylian Mbappe. Suddenly Kylian Mbappe takes that spotlight again. Vinicius feels like he's in the background again. And it just builds up this sort of animosity, this sort of angst that Vinny Jr. has in him that does propel him to perform well often. But in this case, it's just with every, you factor in the fact that Xabi Alonso isn't really putting up with his attitude, was benching him for a while, was yanking him off in games, which he wasn't really used to. It kind of just feeds into this sort of storm of Vinicius Jr. not playing well. And if he's saying that he won't renegotiate, I mean, I think Xabi Alonso is going to be gone, so it's not going to be a factor. But he said he won't renegotiate so long as his relationship with Xabi Alonso isn't good. If I was Real Madrid, if they got a good offer from Saudi Arabia, some unbelievable money, I personally would maybe accept that. Because I just feel like you have Rodrigo that can play down the left, where he prefers to play. He doesn't like playing on the right. And Xabi said he wouldn't play him out of position, and then he did, because I guess he had to. But you have Rodrigo who can play there. You have Arda Güler who can play on the other side. You have Kylian Mbappe as someone who should be sort of built around. I don't like having multiple stars like that. It didn't work at PSG that well. Of course, Luis Enrique comes in and rectifies it, and I don't know that it will work at Real Madrid. So letting Vinicius Jr. go, maybe Real Madrid is leaning towards that a little bit in comparison to giving him this outrageous contract demand that he has. Okay, let's, before we get to it, Anna says, do you think you will see Salah back in a Liverpool shirt. He's going off to AFCON. I don't know. There would be a lot. I think we will ultimately, because it would take a lot for him to get a move away over to Saudi Arabia, or there's interest from MLS. I think it's most likely that we will see him in a Liverpool shirt again, even though it looks like he is trying to facilitate that move away with sort of the lonely posting he's doing. You know, him sitting in the gym alone, him sitting in a park in Liverpool all alone, empty park, just taking a picture of his view of the fallen leaves on the ground. Very, very sad posting. So it looks like he is trying to sort of facilitate that, but we'll see. Let's move on to Club Brugge versus Arsenal. Now, Arsenal come into this after losing to Aston Villa this past weekend in the Premier League, and they had quite the rotated back line, which was out of necessity as well. You had Norgard and Hincapie as the center backs. You have Ben White as the right back. You have Gabriel, Saliba, Mosquera all out. Declan Rice is out as well in their midfield, and they labored at the start, but a moment of brilliance from Noni Madueke gets them over the line. Well, ultimately, they have more goals than that, which we'll get to. But I mean, that was unreal. He holds off a player, he beats a couple of other players, and then hits that sick strike off of the bar and in. I don't think that there is anything more beautiful than a strike that just cannons off the crossbar and straight down into the goal. That's my favorite kind of goal, man. I love, love, love seeing that. So Madueke, he got another goal later. As you can see, it was not exactly an easy match away to Club Brugge. Club Brugge are a decent side. They can play, but they came up against a very, very good side. You know, Madueke getting that second goal to make it 2-0 with his head. Great, great cross. And he's becoming I'd say one of their most important signings from this season. If we look at who he's covering, right? Bukayo Saka and how well he's doing so far at taking that right flank and making sure that there's no drop in quality when the backup to Saka is there. Madueke could be a starter for England at this point with the way that he's been playing since moving to Arsenal. Arsenal have two potential England starters on that right wing. As we've said a few times during these shows, you know, this is the big difference between Arsenal of this season and Arsenal of last season. You know, you had Martinelli, who scored in 4 consecutive matches coming into this. He made it 5 in this game with a brilliant goal himself. But Martinelli was one of those guys that was sort of on the bubble between being a starter and being a depth guy right now. You know, he has the quality to be a starter this season, which last season, one of the reasons why they went so hard in bringing in guys like Eze and Madueke on the wings is because guys like Trossard and Martinelli, when they wanted to make deep runs in the Champions League, they just weren't of that quality that allowed them to compete with a PSG, for example, to have that killer blow against them. Now he is playing like that, but they also have a ton of depth in order to get themselves over the line in these games. Now, what's funny is one of the guys who we thought was going to take Arsenal over the top, that was talked about for so long, Victor Gyökeres. It was always said that they bring in a striker and, you know, Arsenal is going to be unbelievable. And they do bring in that striker, and he is struggling, and I worry about him. And I say this as a Victor Gyökeres enjoyer. I knew as a Benfica supporter, watched a lot of him at Sporting, I knew that he would kind of struggle in the big matches. I was aware of that. But how he isn't scoring in matches like this, in matches against sort of the quote unquote weaker opposition in the Premier League, 6 goals this season. That is not enough for a guy that they paid that amount of money for. He's had very little effect in these games. It's interesting how the narrative has sort of been flipped because we thought the striker signing would be the thing that makes them, you know, contenders in every competition. But it's looking like all the other signings, like your Eze's and Madueke's and Zubamendi, if you will, or all the guys in the center back position to add depth there, it's looking like they are the ones that are going to provide the most value to Arsenal this season. So Arsenal, another match where they do not concede. They conceded 1 goal in 6 matches in this competition. Unbelievable turnout from them. Absolutely fantastic. Now, Chelsea went away to play against another blue and black team in Atalanta, and they lose in Bergamo. This Atalanta team is one to watch, I think, under Raffaele Palladino. He's a guy that I do have a lot of respect for. He's done really well, or he did really well at Fiorentina last season before ultimately leaving due to having a disagreement with the sporting director. Wasn't anything to do with his performance. He did very well with them. But for the first time since 2013, you see Chelsea lose after scoring first in a Champions League match. And you get the feeling that Maresca threw this game a little bit. You know, at 1-1, he took off Enzo for Malo Gusto, and he brought on Ashiampong, uh, he brought on Malo Gusto, who he already had Ashiampong on there, Reece James, Mark Cucurella, and Malo Gusto. So four fullbacks, you know, some of them playing in the midfield or what have you, four fullbacks at 1-1. When he had on the bench someone who could directly, excuse me, my God, I speak poorly about Enzo Maresca, and then I can't speak. My goodness, I'm sorry about that, guys. Chelsea's 2-1 loss to Atalanta means they're winless in their last five UCL away games. Yes, and what I was saying about the substitution that he made was he had someone like an Andre Santos that could play in the 10 position, a direct like for Enzo Fernandez. Now, Andre Santos is more of a deeper lying midfielder, but still, he is a midfielder. He is not a fullback. You also have Estevão, highly talented young Brazilian who can play on the right. Yes, that's where he's best, but he also plays through the middle. He did that at Palmeiras. He's done that at Chelsea before as well. So you do wonder why Maresca didn't go for either of those guys at 1-1 to try and get a win, right? And so what happens? Charles de Ketelaere takes control of this game and he ends up scoring and winning the match for Atalanta, which, you know, too bad for Chelsea. They had it in their hands and ultimately they threw it. Maresca does have a tendency to make these sort of mistakes. You know, since that win over Barcelona, I believe they are struggling for a win. I believe they're winless, if I'm not mistaken. So he sold his soul for that 3-0 against Barcelona at Stamford Bridge, apparently. But yes, there's only so many times that he can sort of make these mistakes, right? Fortunately for him, Chelsea are still in a good position in the standings for the Champions League and the Premier League, so there's no danger around him. But it does frustrate Chelsea supporters. They feel like they make progress only to go backwards due to silly little things like that. And finally, guys, Leverkusen versus Newcastle United. Now, just quickly with this one, Newcastle United going away to Bayer Leverkusen. Leverkusen beat Man City last match day, so a very good team. They've been getting better and better under Kasper Hjulmand, who of course replaced Erik ten Hag, who was sacked in record time at the very beginning of the season, set a record for the fastest firing they've ever seen in the Bundesliga. Now, Leverkusen do take the lead from an own goal from a set piece. I believe it went off of Bruno Guimarães, then it went in from an Andrik header. But the more the match rolled on, the more comfortable Newcastle looked, the more in control Newcastle looked. They got on level terms through a penalty. Anthony Gordon's fifth goal this season in the UCL. Alan Shearer, he only scored 6 goals in a single UCL season, so we could see Anthony Gordon overtake that. But what used to be interesting to me about Newcastle United was how even if they were sort of maybe not struggling in the Premier League, but they were not doing very well in the Premier League, they were still putting up a good fight in the Champions League. And they did fail to get the win here. I believe it ending 2-2. But look, they are a team that have shown that they are not scared no matter where they go in the Champions League. They're not scared of big opposition, scary stadium, whatever. And they welcome teams with open arms in order to have their home fans absolutely eviscerate them. So very impressed with Newcastle United and their sort of conquest so far. I believe they are very much in touching distance of the top 8. Yes, they have 10 points, and it takes 12 points to get you into the top 8. So Newcastle United, very, very good performance so far this season from them. Guys, like I said, this is the last bit of Champions League that we are going to see for about a month, just over a month now. So I want to thank you for joining me here today. This has been a quick, rapid fire, getting through the biggest matches that happened in the Champions League. We spent a lot of time on Real Madrid versus Manchester City, but there was a lot to talk about there and the repercussions that will come from that match. I want to thank you guys for dropping your questions in the chat. I do appreciate that. Other than that, how many times can I say that? My name is Adrian. I appreciate you watching. Take care, guys.